We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
The 23.
Hey, what's up you guys? This is Steffi, aka In My Humble Opinion, and welcome back to another IMHO Film Club movie review. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Judy. So Judy stars Renee Zellweger, Finn Wittrock, Jessie Buckley, Michael Gambon, Rufus Sewell, and many others. The director is Rupert Gould, and the screenplay was by Tom Edge, based on the stage play End of the Rainbow by Peter Quilter. Judy is the biopic, however you want to say it, centered on the legendary Judy Garland. The film specifically chronicles her time in London during the winter of 1968, where she performed a series of sold-out concerts months before her untimely death. So before we get into the movie review, I just want to say really quickly, and I think it's really important that I say this so you know the context at which I'm coming from. I like Judy Garland, I respect Judy Garland, but I am not a huge Judy Garland stan. Not because I hate her or anything, it's just because I don't really know her like that. Alright, so as in all movie reviews, I'm going to be talking about the pros and the cons, and then I'm going to be giving my overall rating, so let's just get right into it. Alright, so the pros. So pro number one for me, obviously, as everyone else has been talking about, is Renee Zellweger. So Renee Zellweger plays Judy Garland in this movie, obviously, if you didn't know that. And this is definitely Renee's film. Her performance in this movie is truly the centerpiece, it is the focus, it is the high point of the movie. The way that Renee plays Judy, in my opinion, is very respectful and it's very endearing and heartfelt. Oftentimes too, I feel like when it comes to these legendary people, especially Judy Garland, the instinct may be to go over the top to the point where it might end up being a caricature, but I like that Renee didn't do that. She still had her Judy mannerisms, the way she talked, the way she held herself, even the way she would wrap her hand around a mic. That was very specifically Judy, but it was never in your face. As far as her singing, I don't really know Judy Garland's voice that well to be like, yep, that's Judy, or no, Judy wouldn't do that. I don't know her voice that well, but just as a casual fan, I will say I thought Renee did a good job, because if you guys didn't know, Renee does her own singing in this movie as well, and I think that's to be commended, and I would imagine that's quite the feat for someone who doesn't professionally sing, let alone has to sing as someone who is as iconic as Judy Garland. My second pro to this movie is I really appreciate that Judy as a character was an active person in her own story. The film does a really great job with setting up where Judy Garland is in her life. Judy isn't really seen as a reliable entertainer. It's hard for her to find work, and she is running out of money. One of the first scenes you see in the movie is of her and her two children performing, and then they kind of just wander around looking for a place to stay. Basically, she's not very stable in her life, to say the least. What I love about this movie is they set up the what, so you understand why Judy makes the decisions that she does make, even though, yes, she's in a really crappy situation, and unfortunately, a lot of the reasons why she's in the situation she's in isn't necessarily her fault. You empathize with her, but you don't pity her. They wrote her as someone who, while she's in the midst of struggling, she is still making active choices in trying to get herself out of this crappy situation. And because of that, she feels like a real person, and she doesn't feel like a victim of her own circumstances. And it just gives Judy Garland as a character in this movie some agency, and it kind of made me respect her even more. My third pro to this movie is the Judy fandom. The film did a really great job in honoring the fandom that upholds and celebrates Judy, especially within the gay community. Two of my favorite characters in this movie are the gays that Judy meets at stage door and befriends. Even though Judy's not my girl, I'm definitely a huge fan of very specific people. It just warmed my heart seeing how this movie portrayed what it means to be a fan of someone and what it feels like to be affected by someone in such a deep way. And then not only for the fan to receive that moment, but for Judy to receive that moment as well. Even though this may or may not have happened, for Judy to have received her flowers in that moment and receive love from her fans and see, wow, this is the impact and love that I have with real people and that the work that I'm doing actually means a lot to people. It was very touching. I was just so happy for those two gays. I was like, yes, receive this moment. You go. And then of course, like that Somewhere Over the Rainbow at the very end, you knew that at some point she was going to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So of course for them to finish with Somewhere Over the Rainbow was such a moment. She couldn't finish the song by herself, but then the audience stood up and helped her get through the song. Or I don't even think she ended finishing the song. It was the audience that finished the song for her. I thought it was very poignant. It just goes to show how beloved Judy Garland was and still continues to be to this day. And my fourth pro, really quickly, is I just really appreciate that this movie just specifically centered on a very specific part in Judy Garland's life. Movies that try to cover a person's entire life from birth to death, or just a huge chunk of their life, that story is very hard to execute and do well because you are covering such a large period in a person's life. And especially when it's someone as iconic as Judy Garland and as complex of a life that Judy Garland led, you're setting yourself up for failure essentially. So I'm happy that this movie just specifically focused on that very specific period in her life. I also like that they covered a period in her life that not many people really think of in Judy Garland's life. So again, I just really appreciated that specificity. And now the cons. So con number one for me is I did feel like this movie was kind of generic. The way the movie functioned is, for the most part, it stayed in the late 1960s where Judy is at in her present day, but every now and then they would cut back to early young Judy Garland, like circa filming Wizard of Oz. The reason why they would do that was to explain how Judy Garland essentially became the way she is. Setting up the movie in that way, setting up the story in that way wasn't necessarily like the most original thing, but as someone who wasn't that familiar with Judy Garland's story, I did appreciate that background information. However, I wish that in terms of the way that this story was told visually, artistically, I wish they would have had a little bit more panache, a little bit more style and flair, because this is Judy Garland. I noticed at some points in the movie, they did this thing where when the paparazzi camera would flash, that would act as a transition into the next scene, which I thought was interesting. So I just, in general, kind of wish they did a little bit more artistic panache in telling this story. Alright, my second pro to this movie is some of the casting, specifically the casting of young Judy Garland and Liza Minnelli. Renee Zellweger may not have looked exactly identical to Judy Garland. That's kind of my problem with the casting of young Judy and Liza Minnelli. However, unlike the actresses who played young Judy Garland and Liza Minnelli, at least Renee Zellweger seemed to embody Judy Garland, whereas with young Judy Garland, I would have not known had the movie not kept addressing her as Judy. So yeah, I wish maybe they at least would have gotten somebody who looked a little bit more like young Judy Garland at that time. And then with Liza Minnelli, it was like as if they didn't really care to cast someone who looked like a young Liza Minnelli. Alright, and my third pro of this movie is the pacing of the Judy Garland, Mickey Dean's relationship. I felt like the part in the movie where you see the two of them get together and then they get married and it's this really beautiful, nice moment, quite literally right after you see the relationship just dissolve. So I kind of wish they had a little bit of like at least a scene or two in between those two moments, or at least I wish they would have slowly tapered off and then showed the dissolution of this relationship, even though I do know that they didn't actually get divorced. But yeah, I just felt like that was very weird pacing in terms of how they depicted that relationship. And because those two moments essentially came one right after the other, it did feel like a bit jarring and sudden to see. All right, so my overall rating for this movie is a solid B+. While this is a generic biopic and the way in which they tell the story is nothing special, what propels this movie is Renee Zellweger's performance. For me, she embodied Judy and gave such an endearing and heartfelt portrayal. Additionally, I just really appreciate that the movie gave Judy agency by making her an active person in her story and not a mere victim of circumstance. By the time we got to the end and Judy started to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I legit got teary-eyed. And I feel like the movie really succeeded in paying homage to such an icon, such a legend, Judy. All right, well, that's about it for this review, for this video. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and please turn on the notification button down below so you know when a new video from me comes out, and comment down below your thoughts on Judy. What was your favorite scene of Judy? What was your favorite musical number of Judy? For me, I will say probably one of my favorite standout scenes was that moment when Judy Garland is on the phone with her daughter in the iconic red London phone booth and she has that whole conversation. Like, that was a moment. And my favorite musical number, aside from Somewhere Over the Rainbow at the very end, I really enjoyed her cover of For Once in My Life. I just loved the jazzy arrangement and I thought it was a really lovely performance. And then let me know, do you guys think Renee Zellweger has a chance of being nominated? And this might be a bit premature to ask, but do you think she has a chance of winning the Best Actress Oscar? As of right now, book me a ticket. I am buying a ticket for the Renee Zellweger Deserves an Oscar nomination. It was such a showcase of her acting ability. I would be so surprised if she does not get nominated. Like, that's how much I believe in Renee, in this Renaissance. So yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts on that. And as always, everything I said was just my own personal thoughts and all my humble opinion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!